Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about the creation of this prop for Supernatural Season 13. It's the Archangel blade. It shows up in the season finale. It was a cool little piece that I got to work on, and I'm just going to quickly go over the process of modeling and texturing and LookDev for it. So let's check out what the shot looks like. It was a quick little one, just throwing it right at the end. Dean, the character, is supposed to be catching this knife flying through the air. Obviously they didn't want to throw a knife at his hand in case he would stab himself, so we threw in a CG knife. So that's what we've got right here. Let's start off just talking about the reference that I gathered. Luckily here at Supernatural we work really close to all the other departments, so I got to just go upstairs and grab the knife and take a bunch of photos of it, and I also got to keep it at my desk as I was working. So if there was anything that I was working on and I wanted to compare the details, I had it right in front of me, which is pretty rare for a lot of cases, but it was really beneficial for me. So let's talk about the model. Here's the model. It's pretty simple. For something like this, I usually like to take up to a day to kind of block in the overall shape, and then up to another day kind of thing to do the rest of the details. This guy was going to be rendered as a sub D. I did a little bit of a ZBrush pass on the leather, nothing crazy, mostly just some warble stuff. To manipulate this seam right here and move around these little threads and stuff, but nothing too crazy in ZBrush. Yeah, it was really nice to have the prop right in front of me, because I could look at all of these details of the bevels and the seams and everything and just make sure that I could get them as accurate as possible. You can kind of see that stuff in there. Let's check out the UVs. So nothing too crazy here, just a single tile. A lot of the times you'll do a single dim tile for each material, but you know, we've got the brass over here and the leather over here. I figured, and some thread here. I figured it was a simple enough prop. I'm just going to do one. I think it's a 4K texture, just a single one. So nothing too crazy, but it turned out pretty well. So let's jump into Mari real quick and just see what the texture painting process looked like. Final texture, all painted up. This is the diffuse channel. The leather is obviously diffuse, and the metal is going to be mostly spec driven. The color, the diffuse weight of the metal is dropped dramatically for the shader that you're using, depending on what render system you're using. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the LookDev portion. But so let's go just one by one, super quickly, talk about the different layers and how I built up this texture. Start with a base color for the leather, and then add in some leather details and wrinkles. You can see here. And then we add a couple of maps, like curvature, displacement, and some other stuff to just get these details in here and pop some things out and push some things back in. The thread was built exactly the same way. Start with a base color, manipulate the hue value, add some grunge and stuff, and then add some of these details in here. You kind of saw the shot before. You'd never really see a whole lot of this, so I wasn't too picky with the details on the leather and the thread, but you still could add something to make it look pretty cool. And then here we've got some dirt and dead skin that kind of shows up on materials like this. You can see in here it's pretty punchy. I like to really push things in the texture painting software or something like ZBrush, because it's a lot easier to push it in here and then dial it back in the LookDev software that you're using, or in the shader. It's easier to pull it back in the shader than it is to push it out sometimes. So that's the way that I like to work. Let's move on to the bronze. So again, this is going to be driving the spec more than the diffuse than anything. So start with some brush metal. These were just basically noise that I used a motion blur or a radial blur in Photoshop and just blended over top of the metal. Added in some grunge and some scratches and just random noise and stuff. It's all kind of trying to match the reference as much as possible. It's not totally random, but you know, to a degree it's nice to add some randomness in there. And then last but not least, I add in little dings and dents and this patina. It's kind of like a oxidization that you can see in this area in here. So this kind of black in here on the different parts of the metal in here, and this detail in here. And also there's some little chips and dings and stuff on the different parts of the metal that I can use for some bump information, as well as speck and gloss. And then on top of all of that, I've got some more dirt and dead skin. You really can't see any of that in the color, but it will show up in the depending on the viewing angle of the light and everything, and the speck and the gloss. So let's just quickly go through the other channels that I made. All I really did for these was copy the color channel, add black and white luminosity filter over top of everything, and then adjust the levels or brightness lookup sort of stuff for each of these layers in here to give it the right value that I want. Same thing for bump. And I compare that to a 50% gray background so I can tell what's being pushed in and pulled out. I also have an RGB mask for different materials, quick selection, and I have a dirt mask to help me pull out those details in the shader as well. So blue for the patina, red for the dirt. So that's a pretty basic overview of the painting process. It's rather quick. I'll do more tutorials later talking much more in depth of the whole painting process, but that should give you a bit of an idea. So let's go into Maya, where I did all the LookDev in V-Ray. So this is my LookDev setup. I kind of set it up a little bit like Katana for the few times that I've used that software package. I kind of like the layout, so I've got my outliner over here, my perspective camera that I can tumble around in here, render camera down here, and then the render view to check that out. I usually, for something like LookDev, I'll usually have my HDRI here, and sometimes I'll have an extra rectangular light, area light kind of thing, so I can get some glancing, some really sharper glancing angle lighting, more artificial lighting than just from the IBL. So we've got some different renders here. You can see kind of what I'm trying to accomplish and see the details, and I zoom in and figure out what's working, what's not working, where I need to push and pull details, maps, what I need to repaint, what I can just remap inside of the software here. And then black background, and I've got my Macbeth chart, gray, 20% gray, and then chrome ball down here. And then this is kind of what it looks like, a little bit lower resolution. So let's look at my hypershade setup. This I'm not going to go into very much detail just because it is so complicated. I'll do another video on my LookDev process because there's kind of a lot going on. I come more from an Arnold background rather than a V-Ray background, so I'm really used to using layered textures that you can get with like the AL shader setup. So basically everything I do, I create these layers and then I plug them into the slots in the shader, but each of these layers will have, I'll make just a tab in the hypershade so that I can do all my work for, this is what goes into the speck layer, and then this is what goes into the bump. Obviously much more simple. Gloss is slightly more complicated, but not too crazy. So let's just check out the spec, basically what I've been doing here. So you can kind of read up in here what each of the channels are. Like I said, this is I kind of prefer the Arnold layer texture shader, or layer texture, but this is what I've got to work with in V-Ray, so we'll just stick with what we have. So layer 1 is the color that I painted inside of Mari, and then I took the gloss channel that I painted, and I did a little levels adjustment on that. And then I've got a dielectric specular fall off that I have masked to the leather, metallic specular fall off that I've got masked to the bronze. I multiplied on top a little bit more metal grain to bring out some of the texture in here a little bit more. And then this one is actually kind of cool. It's this grunge that I've remapped with some funky this weird ramp here. It's kind of hard to see in this reference photography. You can kind of see it in here a little bit, but when I was holding the knife, I noticed that in this patina I got this really strange kind of like heat warbling effect. You know how metal can sometimes turn blue in different colors where it's been heated up and welded together. So I really wanted to incorporate details like that, and you can kind of see it in here. That's that effect that's happening right in here. So I really wanted to keep that in there. And then on top of that, I just have just like fingerprints and grunge overlay that I actually got from a Grant Warwick texture package. The bump, I just used the bump, and I used the RGB mask to power that in different ways. I'll go over that in more depth in another video. And then I also have this dirt mask that I use to power how far out I want to bump, or how pushed in the this dirt in here is. And gloss, very similar workflow. I also use a surface shader that I'll attach from time to time, and isolate it with each mask that I have, or with each texture that I have, just to see how it looks overall on the entire piece. So that's more or less what my workflow is for creating a piece like this, as fast as I could possibly go. I hope that's a little bit interesting to you, and I hope you learned something. So, yeah, this is the final piece again. I'll just do one more render of this. Alright, thanks for watching, and check me out for more videos in the future. Thanks very much.